It was a Saturday morning, like any other. I had just finished making breakfast when I heard my phone buzz. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I picked it up, I saw something that made my stomach drop. It was a text message from an unknown number, but what hit me like a ton of bricks were the words, "I don't think he'll ever find out." My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The room felt colder as I stared at the screen. I had always trusted Jake, my partner, and had never suspected a thing. But now there it was, proof of something I never thought possible. The text didn't just rattle my sense of trust, it shattered it. My mind raced. Who was this person? What was happening behind my back? And, most importantly, was Jake really the person I thought he was? I felt my world begin to tilt, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep standing. I tried to ignore the nagging voice in my head, convincing myself it was just a mistake, a misunderstanding. But deep down I knew something was wrong. I couldn't just ignore what I'd seen, what I'd heard. For the first time in years, I was questioning everything I thought I knew about Jake. The perfect man I had built my life around now seemed distant, a stranger. The love we shared felt like a lie. Could I trust him again? Could I trust myself? Jake was everything I thought I wanted, but was he ever really mine? I needed answers, but I wasn't sure I was ready for the truth. The more I thought about it, the more I realized, maybe I wasn't the one who had been blind. Maybe Jake had always been the one to deceive me. And now, I was left to pick up the broken pieces of a life that had never really been mine. The days passed in a blur of confusion. I tried to act normal, to ignore the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. But it was impossible. I couldn't look at Jake the same way. Every time he smiled, I wondered if it was real, or just a mask. I tried to focus on work, on anything else to distract myself, but nothing worked. My mind kept going back to that text, that one line that had destroyed the foundation of everything I thought I knew. "I don't think he'll ever find out." It was a simple phrase, yet it carried so much weight. Who was this person that had texted him? What was the nature of their relationship? My suspicions grew with every passing hour. I knew Jake was hiding something, and I couldn't stop myself from seeking the truth. I started digging, checking his phone when he wasn't looking for any sign that might reveal the betrayal I was afraid of. What I found shattered me even more. The messages were cryptic, but unmistakable. Jake wasn't just lying to me, he was cheating. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront him. Jake was in the kitchen, making breakfast, completely unaware of what I had just discovered. The calm, mundane morning felt like a cruel joke. I stood in the doorway, staring at him as he moved around the kitchen, humming a song. It should have been a normal moment, but it wasn't. It was all a lie. "Who's Samantha?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Jake froze, his hand midair, a knife clutched in his grip. He looked at me, his expression immediately shifting from surprise to guilt. His eyes darted nervously, and for the first time, I saw a crack in the facade he had built. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice too calm, too rehearsed. But I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew. And for a brief moment, I thought he might confess. But then, he tried to play it off. "It's nothing, just a colleague from work," he said, his voice faltering slightly. But I could see through it. I knew there was more, and I wasn't going to let him lie to me anymore. The confrontation was a blur of emotions. Jake tried to deny everything, his excuses weak and filled with lie. "You're overreacting," he said, trying to pull me into a hug, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me," I snapped, my voice shaking. The anger and hurt inside me surged to the surface. I had trusted him. I had given him everything, and he had thrown it all away. "I know what's going on, Jake," I said, my voice steadier now, but still filled with the sting of betrayal. "I saw the messages. I know about her." Jake's face fell, and for the first time, I saw the truth in his eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, his voice low. It just happened." I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words crush me. The man I had loved, the man I had built my life with, was gone. What hurt the most was that I didn't even know if he was truly sorry, or if he was just trying to save himself. "I can't believe you did this," I whispered, my voice cracking. And in that moment, I knew. The man I thought I knew, the man I had trusted, had never truly been mine. I had been living in a lie. The days after our confrontation were a blur. Jake had left the house, claiming he needed some space, but it felt like he was running from the consequences of his actions. He hadn't even apologized. He hadn't even tried to explain himself. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, trying to make sense of it. But nothing added up. His excuses felt hollow. "It just happened" wasn't enough. My mind raced as I tried to put the pieces together. If he truly cared about me, why would he throw everything away? Why didn't he fight for us? The pain of betrayal was suffocating, and every moment without Jake felt like a little more of the life we had built together was slipping away. I needed answers. And I wasn't sure how far I was willing to go to get them. But I had to know. I started to search through his things, his phone, his computer, his personal belongings. I knew it was wrong, but the need to understand, to uncover the truth, was overwhelming. What I found only confirmed my worst fears. What I found was nothing short of devastating. There were dozens of messages, not just from Samantha but from others, people I didn't recognize. Words like "I miss you," "I can't wait to see you again," and "you're everything I've wanted" left me breathless. My hands were shaking as I scrolled, each message cutting deeper into my heart. I had always prided myself on being intuitive, on trusting my gut, but now I realized how blind I had been. Jake had been living a double life, and I had been too trusting, too in love to see it. I couldn't stop scrolling, couldn't stop reading the lies he'd fed me, while he was off with someone else, playing a role he never should have been allowed to. "How could you do this?" I whispered to myself. The question lingered in the silence, unanswered, but deep inside, I knew there would be no satisfactory explanation. He didn't love me. Not in the way I thought. And that thought broke me more than anything else. I was trembling when I finally put the phone down. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and rage, but there was one thing that I knew for sure: I couldn't let this go. I couldn't live in denial anymore. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. That night, Jake came home, and for the first time I wasn't sure if I was ready to face him. He walked in with his usual easy smile, but it faltered the moment he saw me sitting there. The weight of his lies between us. He tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "You don't need to explain," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "I know everything." His face paled, and he immediately stepped forward, but I didn't want him near me. "How long, Jake?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How long were you lying to me?" There was no answer at first, just silence. And then, finally, he spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he said, his voice full of regret. But I didn't care. His apology meant nothing. It was too late. The confrontation wasn't as explosive as I had imagined. There were no shouting matches, no tears. Instead, there was an eerie calmness between us. Jake kept apologizing, saying how sorry he was, but every word felt empty. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said again, his voice quiet. "It wasn't like I planned it." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he had hurt me, but I couldn't. Instead, I stood up, walked past him, and grabbed my coat. "I don't want to hear your excuses anymore, Jake. You don't get to explain away what you've done." My hands shook as I put on my coat, the realization setting in. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't fix him. And I wasn't sure I wanted to anymore. Jake reached out to me, but I pulled away. "This is over," I said, my voice steady. "We're done." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of clarity. I was done living in his shadow. I was done being his fool. I spent the next few days in a fog, trying to wrap my mind around everything that had happened. Jake was gone, and for the first time in a long time, I had space to think. The pain was overwhelming, but so was the relief. I had been living in a lie, and now I was free. But even with that freedom, I couldn't shake the feeling of being betrayed. It wasn't just the affair. It was the lies, the deceit, the way Jake had manipulated me into thinking everything was fine. I had trusted him with my heart, and he had thrown it away. The hardest part wasn't just losing him, it was realizing that I had given everything to someone who didn't deserve it. But I knew now that it wasn't my fault. Jake was the one who chose to betray me, and I was the one who had to walk away. The journey ahead would be painful, but it was mine to make. And I would make it alone, without him. It's strange how quickly the truth comes rushing in once the floodgates open. I had already known deep down, but seeing the messages and hearing the lies from Jake, it all confirmed what I feared most. He had been living a double life, and I had been a fool to believe otherwise. The worst part, he wasn't even sorry. As the days passed, I realized something even more painful. Jake didn't care about me the way I thought he did. He cared about what I could give him. He loved the idea of me, but not me. Not really. One night, when I was going through his things again, I found something I wasn't ready for. His wallet, a folded receipt, and a note written by Samantha. It was a love letter, tucked away so carefully that he probably thought I would never find it. It was there in black and white, clear as day. I can't wait to see you again. Everything I want is with you. The words burned into me, each one like a needle. I wasn't just betrayed by Jake. I was betrayed by someone who had pretended to love me, who had built our life on a lie. The moment I found that letter, everything changed. Jake was no longer the man I had loved. He was a stranger, someone who had used me to get what he wanted. I didn't know how much more of this I could take, but I had to confront him. There was no more hiding from the truth. The next morning I called him. His voice on the other end was the same as always, too calm, too practiced. "We need to talk," I said. He knew exactly what I meant. When he arrived, he tried to act as if nothing had happened. He smiled, even. "Morning, Emma. Everything okay?" But I couldn't let it go any longer. "I know about Samantha," I said, my voice steady but filled with the fury I had been holding back. His face dropped. The act was over. "You don't have to pretend anymore, Jake," I continued, my heart pounding. "I know everything. The lies, the affair, the way you've been playing me. It's all over." He stood there, speechless, unable to deny anything. The silence between us was suffocating. I could feel the weight of his guilt pressing down on me, but I wasn't interested in his apologies. I had heard enough lies. What followed was nothing like I imagined. Jake didn't beg for forgiveness, didn't cry, didn't even seem ashamed. He simply stood there, looking at me as if I were the one who had betrayed him. He tried to justify his actions, saying it wasn't what I thought it was, but the more he spoke, the more it became clear that he was only trying to save face. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, his voice shaky but still defensive. "I just needed something more." More? What was more than what we had? What could he have possibly needed that I hadn't given him? My mind raced, but all I could say was, "You've already hurt me. This is over, Jake." He didn't fight me. Instead, he dropped his head, as if he was finally accepting the reality of what he had done. But that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to just walk away. I needed to know why. Why Samantha? Why did he go to her instead of talking to me? I wanted answers, not excuses. "She made me feel wanted," Jake finally admitted, his voice quiet. "I know it was wrong, but you stopped making me feel special. You were so caught up in everything else. I felt invisible." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always tried to make him feel loved, prioritized, but I didn't realize how far I had been pushing him away. Jake was right about one thing. Our relationship had changed. But I never thought that would make him turn to someone else. "So, this is my fault?" I asked, the bitterness seeping into my voice. "You cheated because I didn't make you feel special enough?" Jake looked up at me, his eyes filled with regret. "No, it's not your fault, but I didn't know how else to fix it." His admission was a knife to my heart. How could he say that? He didn't even know what he had until it was too late. The damage was done, and nothing he said could change that. The trust we had was shattered, irreparably. In the end, I didn't need to hear any more. I had my answers, and they were all I needed to make my decision. Jake had destroyed our relationship, not with one mistake, but with countless lies, and he had broken my heart. As he stood there pleading with me to understand, I realized I didn't need him anymore. "I can't do this anymore, Jake," I said quietly. "You've broken me and I can't fix it. You don't get to do this to me." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Please don't touch me," I whispered. I had been his fool for too long. He wasn't the man I thought he was. He wasn't the man I needed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. "I'm leaving," I said, the words heavy but final. "You need to figure out who you really are. Because this version of you, it's not someone I can love." The days after I left, Jake felt like an emotional battlefield. I was in a constant state of turmoil, caught between anger, sadness, and disbelief. Jake kept reaching out, sending me texts, leaving voicemails, and even showing up at my door, asking for a chance to explain, begging for forgiveness. But I had nothing left to give him. My mind was made up, and yet, part of me couldn't help but feel a small pang of doubt. Was I making the right decision? Was I throwing away a relationship that, despite the betrayal, still held so many memories? But every time I thought about giving him another chance, I remembered the way he looked at me when I confronted him. The way he tried to justify everything as if it were my fault, as if I had caused his actions. The more he begged, the clearer it became he wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was only sorry that he got caught. I wasn't just losing Jake, I was losing the person I thought he was. And I couldn't bear to keep holding on to something that wasn't real anymore. The more Jake pushed, the more I withdrew. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that I had never truly known him. The man I had loved was nothing more than a mask, and I had been too blinded by love to see through it. Jake came to see me one last time, and this time I was ready. I didn't want to hear his excuses anymore. "I've been thinking," he said, trying to soften the mood, but I cut him off before he could go any further. "No, Jake, I've been thinking, and I've come to a conclusion. I can't do this. I can't keep living in a relationship where trust is nothing more than a lie." His face fell, but he didn't argue. He didn't try to manipulate me anymore. Maybe he realized I was done. I was done with the lies. I was done with the person who had once been my partner. "I'm sorry, Emma," he whispered. "I truly am." His words fell flat in the silence between us. And I realized I didn't need him to apologize anymore. It wouldn't fix what had been broken. It wouldn't bring back the love I had once believed in. The finality of the moment was suffocating, but also strangely freeing. As soon as Jake left, I felt an overwhelming sense of calm, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. I sat down on the couch, staring at the empty space where he had just stood. It was over. For so long, I had defined myself by our relationship, by the love I thought we shared. But now, I had to redefine myself. I had to figure out who I was without him, without the lies, without the betrayal. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew it was the only way forward. The pain would come in waves, I knew that. But every time I felt it, I would remind myself that I was making the right choice. Jake wasn't the person I thought he was. He wasn't the man I needed. And in the end, that was the only truth that mattered. Weeks passed, and I started to rebuild my life piece by piece. I spent time with friends and family, leaned on them for support, and slowly, I began to rediscover who I was outside of Jake. But the emotional scars lingered. I couldn't erase the hurt, the betrayal. There were days when I woke up feeling fine, but by afternoon I would be drowning in memories of him, of the good times we had, of the promises he had broken. I found myself questioning everything. Had I been blind to the signs? Had I ignored the little things that in hindsight should have been obvious? But I knew one thing for sure. I was better off without him. I wasn't going to let the past define me. I would find strength in this pain. I would learn from it. And I would never let myself be that vulnerable again. I couldn't afford to be. Then one evening, as I was sorting through some old things, I came across a box of memories, pictures, trinkets, and mementos of the time Jake and I had spent together. I opened the box, and for a moment, the flood of memories overwhelmed me. I held a picture of us from a vacation we had taken years ago. We were so happy, so in love. But now, looking at it, I realized that version of us was gone. I wasn't going to live in the past anymore. I was ready to let go. I placed the picture back in the box and closed it. It was time to pack away the past and focus on the future. I had learned that no matter how much we want to hold on to what we once had, sometimes it's better to let go. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew it had to be better than staying in the darkness of my past. And I was determined to step forward, no matter how uncertain it seemed. In the weeks following the breakup, I felt as though I was walking through life in a fog. Every day was a mix of numbness and emotional chaos. Some moments were peaceful, like when I spent time with friends or engaged in activities I had once loved. Other moments were filled with anxiety, doubt, and that ever-present ache in my chest. But despite the pain, I knew something had changed in me. I was no longer the woman who was desperate to please Jake. I was starting to rediscover myself, and in that process I realized just how much I had given up to maintain a relationship with someone who didn't value me. The moment of clarity came when I had a conversation with my best friend. She didn't mince words. "You were always so caught up in him, Emma. What about you? What do you want now?" Her words pierced through the fog. It was time to stop thinking about what I had lost and start thinking about what I had left. Myself. It wasn't an overnight transformation. There were days when I would hear Jake's name or think of something we had done together, and the grief would hit me like a wave. But each time it came, I learned how to ride it out. I started going to therapy, talking about everything I had been bottling up for years. The pain was still there, but I was learning to cope. I was learning to take back control. My friends and family were a constant source of support, reminding me of my worth when I lost sight of it. Slowly, I began to heal. One evening, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with my sister, laughing about an inside joke we had shared since childhood. It was the first time in what felt like forever that I genuinely laughed. And in that moment I realized I had been so focused on the relationship with Jake that I had forgotten about the relationships that truly mattered. Myself, my family, and my friends. One night, I found myself standing in front of a mirror, looking at the reflection of the woman I had become. She was different. She was stronger. She was more confident. But there was still something missing. I wasn't fully healed yet. The scars from Jake's betrayal were still there, and I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about accepting it and choosing to move forward despite it. I had loved with all my heart, and I had been broken because of it. But that didn't mean I was broken. It meant I was human. I wasn't perfect. I didn't have to be. The past was never going to change, but I had the power to decide what happened next. And I chose me. I chose to rebuild my life on my own terms, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a survivor who had learned to trust herself again. I knew the healing process wasn't linear. There were days when the loneliness would creep in, or when I'd wonder if I'd ever be able to trust someone again. But the more I focused on my own growth, the less I felt the weight of the past. I realized that I didn't need Jake to feel complete. I didn't need anyone to define who I was. I was whole on my own. And as time passed, I began to understand that Jake had never really been the person I needed. His lies, his betrayal, they were his choices, not mine. And I had a choice too. I could either let his actions define my worth, or I could reclaim it for myself. The latter was hard. It took time, and it took patience. But I was worth it. I didn't need to forgive Jake to move on, but I needed to forgive myself for not seeing the truth sooner. And that forgiveness came slowly, piece by piece, until one day I realized that I had fully let go of the pain. The final step in my journey was accepting the fact that Jake and I would never be what we once were. But I was ready to let go. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just free. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, and now I was standing tall, ready to take on whatever came next. My phone buzzed, and for a moment, I hesitated. It was a message from Jake. It had been weeks since I'd last heard from him. He apologized again, asking if we could talk. I smiled to myself, not out of anger or spite, but because I had finally reached the point where I didn't need closure from him. I had already given it to myself. I deleted the message and went back to what I had been doing, living my life. I knew now that I didn't need him. I never had. Months had passed since the breakup, and every day I felt a little bit lighter, a little bit more like myself. There were still difficult moments, but I no longer carried the weight of betrayal. I started focusing on things that made me happy, things I had long neglected. I picked up my old hobbies again, painting, writing, hiking. I surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared about me, people who reminded me of who I was before I ever met Jake. One evening, while I was out for a run in the park, I bumped into an old friend from college, Lily. We hadn't talked in years, but as soon as I saw her, it felt like no time had passed at all. She invited me to dinner the next week, and I agreed. I had been so isolated during my relationship that I had forgotten how much I needed the people who truly cared for me. As I reconnected with Lily and others, I realized that I wasn't alone. I had an entire support system, and I was stronger than I ever knew. It wasn't long before I started to notice a shift in myself. I wasn't just healing, I was thriving. I took a trip to the coast with Lily and some other friends, a trip I had been putting off for years. The ocean air, the waves crashing on the shore, and the laughter of my friends made me realize how much I had been missing out on. I felt alive again, not because of Jake, but because of me. As I watched the sunset that evening, I finally understood the concept of letting go. Not just of Jake, but of everything I thought I was supposed to be. I wasn't just defined by my relationships or by my past mistakes. I was defined by my ability to rebuild, to choose happiness, and to embrace my future without fear. During the trip, I had a conversation with Lily that stuck with me. "I never realized how much you had been holding back, Emma," she said as we sat on the porch, looking out at the stars. "You always seemed so strong, but I could see the pain behind your eyes. I'm glad you're finally free." I hadn't realized it until she said it, but I had been carrying so much weight for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to truly be myself. Jake had clouded my world with lies and manipulation, and I had spent so much time trying to fix something that was never meant to be fixed. The moment I let go, everything became clearer. The pain still lingered, but it no longer controlled me. "I'm starting over," I told Lily, my voice filled with conviction. "I'm not going back to that version of myself. I'm moving forward, and I'm doing it for me." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. As the months went by, I found myself enjoying my life again. I went on more trips, started taking art classes, and even began dating again. But this time, I was different. I wasn't looking for validation in someone else. I wasn't trying to fill the void that Jake had left. I was whole on my own, and anyone who came into my life would need to understand that. For the first time, I was in control of my happiness. The idea of love didn't scare me anymore. It was something I could give and receive freely without the burden of expectation. I realized that love, true love, was about partnership, trust, and mutual respect. Jake had never understood that. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone. I was worthy of love, just as I was. And when the right person came along, they would see that too. I still think about Jake from time to time, but it no longer hurts. It's more of a quiet acknowledgement that our time together was a chapter in my life, one that taught me invaluable lessons. I learned that love can be beautiful and devastating, but it should never define you. I realized that I am capable of so much more than I ever gave myself credit for. And while my journey wasn't easy, it has led me to a place of peace. As I look back, I don't regret anything. The pain, the heartbreak, the healing, it all shaped me into who I am today. I'm proud of the woman I've become. I may have been betrayed, but I didn't let it break me. I rebuilt myself piece by piece, and now I know that I am whole. The best part. I did it on my own. It's strange how life moves on, isn't it? You go through something that feels like it will break you, and then one day you realize that you've survived. The weight that once felt so heavy starts to feel lighter. There are still moments of grief, but they are no longer all-consuming. I've learned to embrace the quiet moments, the moments where I can simply exist and enjoy life for what it is. I'm not searching for something to fill a void anymore. I've filled that void with myself. I went to the beach one weekend, on my own this time, to clear my mind. I stood by the ocean, feeling the breeze against my skin, listening to the waves crashing. It was the first time I felt truly free, not just from Jake, but from the person I had been, the one who was afraid to let go. Now, I am ready to let life take me wherever it may go, without fear. The past is no longer my anchor. I am my own anchor now. The people around me started noticing the change too. Lily, my closest friend, remarked one evening, "You're different, Emma. You've changed in the best way." It wasn't just the outward transformation. It was something deeper. I was no longer the person who defined herself by others' expectations or by the pain of betrayal. I had found my own sense of worth, my own direction. I wasn't afraid to pursue the things I wanted anymore, whether it was a new career opportunity, traveling, or even just taking time for myself. I felt whole. And the best part, I didn't need anyone to complete me. I had learned the hardest lesson, that true fulfillment comes from within. The relationships I have now, with family, with friends, and even with the potential of a future partner, are all based on mutual respect and genuine love, not on need or insecurity. One evening, I ran into Jake. It was completely unexpected. He was with a friend at a local bar, and I almost didn't recognize him. He looked different, more worn out, like he hadn't been taking care of himself. The usual charm he used to wear was gone. He saw me across the room and froze for a moment. I could tell he wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to walk away to not give him the satisfaction of seeing me, but I didn't. I stood my ground. He approached me cautiously. "Hey, Emma," he said, his voice uncertain. "I've been trying to get in touch. I wanted to apologize, to explain." I stopped him before he could go further. "It's too late, Jake," I said, my voice steady. "You don't owe me an explanation. I've already moved on." He looked at me, the regret in his eyes clear, but I didn't feel anything for him anymore. Not anger. Not sadness. Just indifference. He wasn't the man I had loved, and I wasn't the woman who had let him define her. After that brief encounter, I didn't think about Jake again. It was like he was a ghost from a past life, a shadow that had no place in my present. I had truly let go. I found peace in knowing that I had lived through the storm and emerged stronger. I began dating again, but this time I wasn't rushing into anything. I was patient, taking the time to learn what I wanted, what I needed in a partner. I wasn't looking for someone to fix me. I was already whole. And when I met someone new, someone who respected me for who I was and supported my independence, I knew it was different. But I didn't rush it. I enjoyed the process of getting to know each other, of taking it slow. I wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore. I had walked through the darkness and had emerged into the light. Looking back, I realized that Jake was never truly the problem. It wasn't his betrayal that had hurt me the most. It was the fact that I had allowed myself to stay in a relationship that didn't nourish me. I had stayed because I feared being alone, because I didn't believe I was enough on my own. But now I know the truth. I am enough. I always was. Jake's actions no longer defined me, and I had found peace in that. My life is mine to create, and every decision I make from here on out will be a reflection of that. I'm not afraid of what's to come. Whatever it is, I know I can handle it. I've learned that true strength doesn't come from never falling. It comes from getting back up. And I will keep getting back up, no matter what. Because I am worthy of love, respect, and all the happiness this world has to offer. And this is just the beginning.